Hey, everybody out there, this is the Progress Report because it's Wednesday at 7 p.m. And it's always the Progress Report at Wednesday at 7 p.m. And it has been for how many years, Mike?
9 years going.
Oh, my God, and we're still having fun? Are we still having fun?
I'm having a blast. I don't. You're working hard. I'm over here. I'm along for the ride. It's a lot of fun. Get to talk to some great people. Sit down with you for an hour every week. It's great. What could go wrong?
And we're having a guest on that we haven't had on this show in all those years, which is astounding to me. We've made requests and it hasn't quite worked out schedule-wise. But tonight we are really pleased to welcome Will Hopkins, the Executive Director of New Hampshire Peace Action, which is the premier organization in the state that tries to make sure we pay as much attention to avoiding war as we do preparing to wage war, as to which we're very good, avoiding war not so good. And we have wars that are imminent, maybe, we hope not, but we certainly have things that cause severe alarm.
We have people in the White House who sure seem like they want something.
We do. Starting with National Security Advisor John Bolton, but we'll talk
about that. How did you know who I was thinking about? How did you know?
How could you miss him? My God, that guy is something else. I mean, when you're counting on Donald Trump to be the dampening influence on outrageous behavior, it's
a great time to be alive.
It's a great time. But in any event, before we get started,
Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. We sure do, don't we?
Isn't that actually an ancient Chinese curse?
Yeah. Here you go.
Here we go.
You got it.
Yeah. In any event, I just want everybody to know that tomorrow I can't wait to get to Concord to join the Elite 400 as we vote to override the governor's veto of the repeal of the death penalty. I just can't wait to do it, folks. You want to call in and disagree with me and say you think we should have the state killing people in New Hampshire, even though we haven't done any such thing since 1939? Have at it. I'll be glad to talk to you. But this is a personal thing with me. It's a thing I believe in so strongly. And I just want to recognize my personal hero, Representative Rennie Cushing. And I hope we have a blowout victory to justify Rennie's years and years of advocacy on this, and many, many others. I had a call from Barbara Keeshan, a distinguished attorney and longtime prosecutor with the New Hampshire Attorney General's
public
office.
Defender, right?
And she said, well, we don't want to get too far ahead of skis, but we are kind of interested in having a party. So I thought that was really good news. And then she wanted my law firm to contribute, which apparently I regret to say we're not going to do because of some split opinion, but I hope she has many people that are more affirming and responding to her than we were, and that she's right, that it's time when we can pretty soon end the practice of New Hampshire, at least in theory, killing people through the execution methods of the state. We haven't executed anybody in the state since 1939, folks. 1939, and then it was hanging. How am I getting off of this? Anyway, now it's lethal.
You're all excited, Bob. You're going to be part of a momentous
it's lethal
vote.
injection. And you know what, folks? The folks that make these drugs you need for lethal injection
they won't sell them to us.
They don't want to use their drugs to kill people. They want to use their drugs to help people. So the whole issue of how you do this is...
There's another theory. They want to make money, but...
well...
But I
don't think there's that much of a market. There's much money to be made
for those poisons.
Yeah,
no, I agree.
So.
And these were all being used for effects that were not the intended purpose of the medications. And, they were becoming harder and harder, and they were having to mix up more and more cocktails, and they haven't been as effective. We've had some real horrific execution scenes around this country.
Executions with obviously horrendous
suffering and pain and
suffering, and it's just... It's gross. It's gross. It's unjust. It's not a deterrent.
And it doesn't work. It doesn't deter.
In any event.
So anyway, we pat you on the back.
I can't wait to get to Concord to vote tomorrow. And some days I don't want to go up there and vote, but tomorrow I'm going to be ready to press the button to support the override of the governor's veto. And really, that's going to be something I'll remember fondly for I hope a long time. But let us go on to other issues of life and death, but not on quite such a narrow level and not such a New Hampshire level. We're really happy to welcome to our show Will Hopkins, Well, thanks for coming down and joining us.
Thanks
It's
for
a
having
real
me.
pleasure to have you here. It's been too long, and glad we
Yeah.
finally worked it out.
Me too.
And would you please, as I suggested, I would ask you to do, introduce yourself a little bit about who you are, how you got into this work, and
Sure.
what you're doing with it.
So my story starts second semester of my sophomore year of college. It was 2000, 2001. And I was decided to take second semester off and teach skiing at Tenny Mountain up in Plymouth.
Oh,
And when the snow melted, I'd spent the whole year ski instructing with a guy who'd done 6 years in the New Hampshire National Guard. He was part of our mountain infantry unit that used to be stationed here in Manchester, the Charlie Company, 3rd of the 172nd Mountain Infantry. And he would tell me stories, and the company had existed 23 years at that point. It had been deployed in-state for flooding support. And he would tell me stories about hiking and ice climbing and rock climbing and skiing and snowshoeing and rappelling off of cliff faces and how much fun he had doing this weekend warrior bit. And it's the winter of 2000, 2001, so the World Trade Towers are standing tall. The National Guard isn't thought of as a combat force. Snow melted. I realized I could not continue to teach skiing on the grass. Wanted to get in shape for rugby season, so I joined the National Guard. I joined Charlie Company, and graduated basic training in late August 2001. So 9/11 happened a few weeks later.
right.
And I got my deployment orders to Iraq around New Year's 2004.
At which point the invasion had already started.
Yes, I was part of the second wave in. I was there from 2004 to 2005. I was an infantryman. We did a lot of convoy escort, route security, and some urban operations. During the Fallujah offensive, we were part of my platoon was detached from our company, and we were part of the cordon for the offensive. So we were blocking off a road and making sure nobody could get in or out of the city. And it was, we were in what they called at that point the Sunni Triangle. So our main route was from about 45 miles north of Baghdad to about 45 miles south of Baghdad. So we'd come down and then head west towards Fallujah, and then go south. That was our main convoy escort route. And we ran security essentially from Baghdad to our base 45 miles north. So it was a very, mortar attacks were a couple times a week, most weeks. Firefights, there were a few. IEDs, probably monthly. So it was a very...
This was the time when there was a lot of casualties in the IEDs, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
They had up armored the
was-
Humvees, and there was
Our Humvees, when I got there, our Humvees were pretty up armored. And they just saved a lot of my friends' lives. We had good armor, but certainly during the first year, and the Marines still had some pretty shoddy equipment. But we
They're
had
a light strike force. It's understandable, isn't it?
there's something about the mystique of the Marines where they don't want the good equipment. They can do it with a burlap sack and a stick. But we had up armored Humvees, we had I think 12 Purple Hearts during that year. We were the only
In a year.
Yeah, we were the only company in our brigade. So that's two levels. Battalion, then brigade. We were the only company in our brigade that didn't suffer casualties. That nobody died.
wow.
And we also had months.
That's a sad tale.
Yeah.
Good for you guys, but
but
it's a sad tale.
It was a really busy department. We also had we had months where our ammo expenditures were more than the rest of our battalion combined. But we had good leadership. We were careful. I think it actually National Guard units. You think of them as Joe and Bob who work at the market, but we had a lot of prior service. We had a lot of adults. Our team leaders weren't 22; they were 35 and had families, and they were mature, calm, level-headed folks. My squad leader had been a ranger instructor, so we had good leadership, and we were really, really lucky. But it was an active deployment. During the lead up to that. As we were deploying, I actually struggled with resistance, with refusing to go, because I knew as I got, as we ramped up to Iraq, that there weren't any credible public sources saying that there was a weapons of mass destruction program in Iraq, that there were all sorts of questions around international law. They hadn't found anything yet during that first year when we deployed, and I felt like we were probably there for the oil, and so my sense was that I was engaged in invading a foreign country, possibly in violation of international law, that it was immoral, and that the people there were defending their country from foreign invaders, which is essentially what I'd signed up to do. So I ethically had a real problem with what I was engaged in. And I decided to go, and sometimes I think of that as something that was really wrong, but I don't know that I'd make a different decision now. When you are enlisted and you refuse to go, at that point they were imprisoning people for about 18 months, and then I'd live the rest of my life with the latest convict, coward, traitor. A year in prison is not something I wanted to do. So I went, I did my job, and I finished my term in the National Guard in 2007. And at that point, once I got out, I started volunteering for Dennis Kucinich. It was presidential primary season, and I started volunteering for this left-wing peace candidate because I wanted to see change. And someone at New Hampshire Peace Action caught wind of that and started asking me to speak alongside films. As I finished my bachelor's and then my MBA, I came onto the board of New Hampshire Peace Action back in about 2008. And then in September of 2009, when our director left early in 2009, I took over as executive director, and I've been there for almost 10 years.
For as long as we've been doing this TV show, Bob.
Yeah.
Think
That's
about
amazing.
that. That's a long time.
That's amazing.
What a great story. It's it traces your evolution, but it wasn't really an evolution. It's like where you started.
Yeah. It was a galvanization. I had never thought of myself as an activist, but when when you see what war does in the places where we wage it, it leaves you. It leaves you scarred. It leaves you carrying things that people aren't really meant to carry, and it left me very driven to get involved in trying to change how U.S. foreign policy is executed around the world and what that looks like.
Wow.
So, were you from New Hampshire? When you say Tenny Mountain, I'm assuming you were at Plymouth State, maybe?
Yeah, so I grew up in Plymouth. I went off to UMaine Farmington for a couple of years, but the Guard paid for in-state schools, so I finished my bachelor's, which was anthropology, sociology, and then got my master's at Plymouth State. So Plymouth is hometown for me. I live in Belmont now and work in Concord. But
So halfway.
Yeah.
See, I knew Will's father very well because he was a lawyer, sort of my generation, and a very genial fellow to practice law with on the occasions when I had a chance to do it. And so, I have a fondness for the Hopkins, I guess, because of my knowledge of your dad. Why do you think it is, Will, that this experience had such a profound effect on you to become active in peace, and maybe not so much on others? So that to me, it's just bizarre how worshipful we are of the military in this country now. I don't understand it.
I think it's a reaction to how disrespectful we were to the Vietnam veterans.
Well, there is that.
We've gone through as a society going from a draft to no draft. I mean, the whole makeup and relationship.
I think there's a little guilt on us all there that we no longer, Congress no longer declares war for us. The president does it by executive order with some vague congressional authorization, which is not a declaration of war. And
so the lines are blurred.
So what is the percentage of the American people of military service age that are actually serving in the military? what is it, 1% or something? I don't know.
I have no idea.
It's a very small percentage.
It-
And I think
it-
the days, like in World War II, when everybody was a soldier, it was a citizen soldier thing. And everybody was in the Army, with some notable exceptions, but, it was a mass army.
There was a sense of shared common purpose.
Exactly.
And even during Vietnam, which was an entirely different situation, every family on the block was subject to the draft. And,
Yeah.
and there was the debate on the propriety or impropriety of the war, but there was, again, a shared, maybe not a common purpose, but a shared common experience.
Yes, exactly
And
right.
What we don't have now is that sharing. We have a very small group of people who are volunteering, and I would hazard to say that, we're drawing from desperate people, where the Army is a good option for them, and most families on a block are not contributing, are not part of the discussion.
And I think
it's-
there's some feeling that, I think there's a little guilt maybe that we are no longer, asking our society in a general sense to share in these sacrifices.
Thanks for fighting for me.
Well, yeah, thanks for fighting for me.
Thanks for making it so I didn't have to
you
do
used to
it.
say
I mean,
thanks for your
if you-
service. Now thanks for fighting for me so I don't have to. And we'll tie yellow ribbons around all the places in the airport when you come home.
I will gladly accept your thanks if you happen to have significant stock in Halliburton. Otherwise, I really didn't do anything for you in Iraq. So,
And that's part of the issue. But you want to know something? That kind of issue, at least during the Vietnam era, where every family was at least theoretically susceptible. Now, we could go to a podiatrist in Manhattan and get a letter saying we couldn't serve, but
As of bone stirs on one of the other feet.
it could be.
We're not sure
It could
which
be
one,
bone
yeah.
spurs, but that went away. But at least, everyone was susceptible to it. And we had to have that debate. Is it right or is it wrong? And it divided some families, it divided some neighbors. But we were all in it. It's right now, we're not fighting these wars. We're talking about them as if they're on TV. They're antiseptic. We don't experience it. Our family doesn't have someone coming home or not coming home. It's somebody else's problem.
And even from when I was in Iraq in 2004 and 2005, things have changed drastically. A lot of, especially under the Obama presidency, a lot of our war fighting was done by drone. It was
Further
it was remote.
anesthetizing
People
us.
from the Air Force Base in Nebraska.
With a joystick, and
Joystick.
that is. That is how a lot of war fighting is getting done. I mean, we dropped ordnance in Yemen, Uganda, Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria. I know I'm missing a couple countries.
I remember when those American forces were captured and abused. What was it? Uganda. Who knew what are they doing there? Who knew they were even
It
there?
was Niger.
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 But you thank you for correcting me. But the point being,
right,
we don't have a common purpose. We don't even know what's going on, and I'm inclined to agree with you. I don't know that we're always fighting for our national interest as we are for our financial interest or the interests of people that have financial interest.
I mean, I think we see it at the highest levels. You can't be taken seriously for U.S. House, U.S. Senate, unless you've raised X number of dollars, and to do that, you've got to get the big financial interests backing you up, and that means oil, that means
pharma,
that means that means military-industrial complex.
Contractors.
It means banks, and if you're not speaking in a way where they trust that you're going to do what's right for them, they're not going to fund you, and you're not going to be taken seriously for federal office.
Yeah. Well,
so our national policy isn't about keeping us safe. It's about keeping the financial interests of those who are funding our political process.
Well, we're about time for a break, but I do want to point out, though, that we're seeing a trend away from that to the small donor who contributes a little bit over the course of time. And that's making room for guys like you and me who don't have the gigantic pockets that the Halliburtons have.
May it be so, but I'm not sure we're there anywhere near that yet. I mean, anyway. Folks, we hope you're going to want to participate in this program. I think it's a really fine guest here with an incredible life story and an incredible mission in his life right now, and that's Will Hopkins of New Hampshire Peace Action, 640-3091. I know you're out there, and I'd like you to call. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to discuss some of the mission of the agents of the organization right now and why the issue of war is looming even large right now in a couple of locations. So join us. We'll be right back. So, folks, if you're just joining us, this is the progress report for this beautiful Wednesday evening in May. It's May 22nd, and we're very, very pleased to have with us for the very first time, it's long overdue, Will Hopkins, the Executive Director of New Hampshire Peace Action, the #1 organization in New Hampshire, and that is advocating that we stop this perpetual appetite for war we seem to have in this country and try peace as an alternative. And
remember the peace dividend when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Berlin Wall came down. We're going to have this peace dividend. Taxes were going to go down because we're going to have all this money we didn't need for the military.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't get my check.
I didn't either. And here we are with the most awesome military in the history of the world, and spend more on military in this country than everybody else in the world combined. Isn't that something like that, Will?
It used to be. It's now, I think we only get down to about 7 or 8, the next 7 or 8 nations
combined.
And that's almost entirely an increase in China's military spending over the last 8 years.
Well, we also had the mandatory cuts back when they were going to shut the government down. Remember that? We've never come. Sequestration.
The sequestration.
I don't think we've ever come off of that, have we?
Yeah, I don't think
But we
so.
do a lot off the books anyway, so it's hard to even tell. We fought the whole Iraq War.
Anyhow, Will, I hope people enjoyed, because I certainly did. Well, I don't enjoy it, but found your personal story compelling and revealing. And you've now been with New Hampshire Peace Action for 10 years?
It'll be 10 years in September.
Wow, and you're still enjoying what you're doing? Or
I mean, I wouldn't say that it doesn't stress me out sometimes. We do a lot of work on nuclear weapons issues, thinking about the reality that John Bolton is whispering in Donald Trump's ear and Donald Trump's finger is on the button is it's I spend a lot of time thinking about that and trying
I had not specifically thought about that, and boy, I wish you hadn't said that, because that's a frightening thought.
I was shocked to learn the other day, there's a magazine called The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, and the most famous thing about that magazine is the clock, the doomsday clock. How many minutes till midnight when it's all over? And I thought, well, hell, the maximum, the worst situation, 2 minutes to midnight, or where the hell it was, had to be, back in the days of the Soviet Union. And I was shocked to learn, I think it was your good friend and my good friend Kurt Smith that said, no, it's
right now.
It's as close as it's ever been right now.
Right now.
And we think about climate change and the possible catastrophe and the sixth extinction and all that. We cannot ignore the fact that we have all these nuclear weapons around the world. And they're proliferating.
And we are abandoning the controls that were in place to protect us in the circumstance.
Yeah.
We are leaving our negotiations with Russia. We're unilaterally abandoning the non-proliferation agreement with Iran. We are whatever thin gossamer protection we had is being torn up.
We've seen the International Nuclear Forces Agreement with Russia. We left that a few months ago. You've got still have tension in the Ukraine, Venezuela. Russia has forces there, and we have tension there. Tension with Russia with China over North Korea.
And in
we've
the South
got
China Sea?
South China Sea, absolutely. Iran, and again, you've got Russia backing Iran. There are a whole number of places where we're currently in very high tension with other nuclear powers. You've also got the New START treaty expiring, and neither Vladimir Putin nor Donald Trump seem to have any interest in continuing the START treaty.
And that's the Strategic Arms Reduction talks. That was where we thought we had turned the corner. We had talked about capping and limiting, and now we were starting to talk about reduction.
Yeah.
And
we have reduced, but
it's drying up.
But
it's
at this point,
go away.
it seems like that treaty it's set to expire next year. We also. There's a lot going on
and Yemen. You mentioned Yemen earlier.
Absolutely,
that is a powder keg right on the Arabian Peninsula.
Sure, you've got the largest humanitarian crisis on earth. 2 million at risk of starving to death over the next year. At least 85,000 children who've starved to death already. The U.S. is
85,000.
85,000.
Think about that, folks. Think about if Manchester lost 85,000 people tomorrow.
Children. That's
understood.
That would be about 85% of our population, or a little less.
That's a devastating number of kids that
starved to death.
Think of the amount of future that's been lost.
Yeah, and that doesn't include the bombing campaigns. It doesn't include those who've died because of lack of medical treatment. That's 85,000 children starved to death in Yemen so far. It's all U.S. weapons. We provide air refueling to Saudi bombers engaging in the blockade. We sold most of the weapons to Saudi Arabia, not gave, but we do give them air refueling. We give them satellite intelligence. We give them ground intelligence. It's very likely.
What's our beef
special
with
forces.
the Yemenis? Why are we doing that?
It's really the U.S. is strategically aligned with the Saudis and the Wahhabi axis and Sunni axis of power on the Arabian Peninsula. Yemen is aligned with Baathists who are secular and the Houthi and Shias. So Russia tends to be aligned with Baathists, Shias, and Houthis, and certainly Iran is aligned with the Houthis and is supporting the Yemenis.
So it's a proxy war.
So it's a proxy war, and Russia and Iran are on one side, Saudi Arabia and the U.S. are on the other side. If you want to get simple about why we're engaged in Yemen the way we are.
Why are we so close to the Saudis? I know they got all this oil.
They took down our towers, didn't they?
They took 15 of the 90.
People seem to forget that. I have not forgiven them for that. They took down our towers.
We're Saudis. And, I know they got a lot of oil, and, that was a very big deal.
We don't need it.
It's not such a big deal anymore. We don't need their damned oil anymore. And yet the tradition was for the American president, who was newly sworn in, always the first visit was to Canada. Our strongest ally, our wonderful neighbor to the north with the
longest border in the world.
Longest border of the world. It's not militarized, and anybody can cross. You used to be able to do it without even a passport. Now you have to have kind of a passport. But and here the first country President Trump went to was Saudi Arabia to do a sword dance.
Yeah.
And their ruler, authorized the brutal murder of an American resident journalist of the Washington Post. And I don't understand what's going on here. And I have to think there's something.
You do, but you just won't admit it to yourself.
Well,
you understand completely.
I just, and despite the fact that the Saudis are Muslim, they are the protectors of the holy sites of Medina and Mecca, and supposedly they're the antagonists of Israel. But these two countries seem to have a lot more in common than differences right now. And give us your perspective on this stuff and why we seem to have the war drums beating for action against Iran.
So Iran is it's an economic rival, at least when if sanctions aren't in place, to Israel and to Saudi Arabia. It is not currently a military rival to either one, but it could be if it continued to have an economy that was.
Well, they've got a 1 million-man army. They really took it to Iraq during the Iraq-Iran war.
Absolutely,
but horrendous cost. But yes, they did.
But we sent 100. We're threatening to send 120,000. You say, well, how does 120,000 Americans, stand a chance against 1 million Iranians? And I can tell you that when it comes to the actual efficacy of those types of forces, 120 American troops could make it to Tehran. No doubt of that.
120,000. You said
120,000. Yeah,
what does that get us? I mean,
nothing.
Again, the Pottery Barn rule,
I can
right?
tell you exactly what it would get us. So Iran has more than twice the population and more than twice the square mileage of Iraq, and they have been training specifically on what to do if the U.S. invades, and that is take off your uniform and start steaming out shape charges and engaging in guerrilla warfare. So what we would get is lots and lots of limbless veterans returning.
Be like Vietnam with more sand and less trees.
And they've set it up that way. The Iranian battle strategy is to let us come in and then make it as expensive in lives, in limbs, and in cash as they can.
Ho Chi Minh did the same thing, and it worked.
Yeah, and the other thing about Iran is that just as we. And I do think that our alliance with the Saudis is primarily oil. You've got the Straits of Hormuz. Still, a third of the world's oil flows through the Straits of Hormuz. And so UAE and Saudi on one side are essential for us to keep that oil flowing. And for Russia, their alliance with Iran is also critically important because controlling the other side of the Straits of Hormuz means that oil is still flowing in their interest as well. So it's a strategic. The Straits of Hormuz, in particular, are a strategic point that I think both Iran and the U.S. would bank the future of our countries on because we are as dependent on oil as we are. And in a conventional conflict, control of the Straits of Hormuz would dictate if you ran out of oil or not. It's a strategic point on the map that neither Russia nor the U.S. can afford to lose. And so that's a big part of why we're rattling the saber at Iran and have been since 2004. They're also not trading oil in the dollar, which they stopped back in 2004. And Saddam stopped in 2002, and that was a problem. But not playing ball with American oil companies is always a problem, and the Saudis make sure they play ball with American oil companies. So they're our allies.
One of my current volunteer job is in the legislatures, and I chair the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee, and I'm pushing the hell out of advancing our commitment to renewables and energy efficiency. And you have to remember that this is a part of this whole issue. If we can reduce our demand for foreign sources,
right?
But Bob, you're still going to have the Koch brothers and all these big American oil companies that are going to push our government to protect their financial interests around the world. Yeah. Even if they're selling the gas to China, they don't care. They're not patriotic. They have no obligation to be patriotic.
Well, just let the economic control. The renewables are coming on fast. Yeah. May it be they come on fast enough to avert a climate disaster, which is very looking iffy now. But they're coming on fast, and we won't have to be dependent on, or our allies won't have to be dependent on this.
I will say it does change the calculus. Like if we have renewables, then we can use those to power our battle cruisers, and it becomes for war planners, not for the people funding it because they're still going to want to make money off of it. But for war planners, it does make it less of a strategic choke point that needs to be controlled.
They don't have anything like the lever overs they had in the 70s when we had the Arab oil embargo.
No.
That's gone. Let's talk to Phil.
Yeah, let's do that.
Hi, Phil. Welcome back. It's always a pleasure to have you join us, and you're on the air.
How are you doing, Phil?
Good evening, sir. Glad to have you back.
First of all, kudos to your guest. I want to thank him for his past service and his present service and activism. I mean,
thanks.
I'm sitting here listening to him going like, where's this guy been all my life? He's just
He's a New Hampshire guy all the way.
I mean, he's right on target, and he's lived it, so God bless him.
Thank you.
But you're welcome. To interject on your conversation, and I'm no Trump apologist by any means, so I want to start with that.
Okay.
But I think what I'm hearing is, and it could be locally, statewide and in your discussion nationally. I think what he's saying is, at least in part, is that although Trump's wrong or our policies aren't in line with his views, it's really not that much different from regime to regime in the United States. I mean, there's still money in politics. It's still about the oil. It's still about the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
And even though there are differences between leaders, whether it's our current leader or our past leader or leaders, and I'll say it, nationally, statewide, or locally, there's really not that much difference. It's all about where's the money, how do I get elected, and it's the same old, and that's why we're having trouble getting off the dime. That's why we're having trouble moving forward. That's why we're having trouble doing the right thing, whether it's for education, for the mentally ill, the war against terrorism, whatever it may be.
The war against drugs, addicted
the
drugs.
opioid.
Yeah.
All of
my
it. You're
hope
right.
is-
You're right.
And believe me, my hat's off to Bob Backus and Mike Farley. My hope is that people like you will somehow land on the square that says, we're not going to go us against them anymore. It's us against everybody, because the them that keep getting elected, keep having the fundraisers and keep taking the money and keep playing middle of the road, they're not getting us anywhere.
Yeah.
Kids are dying, kids aren't getting educated, people
Yeah.
all over the world are getting killed.
Yeah.
And a gentleman like this guy, I'm like, wow, man, this guy's unbelievable. I want him to come into my social studies class.
I'm happy to. If you
I
got a
wanna-
social
I wanna
studies
learn
class,
from
I'll,
him, you know?
I'll come.
He does a lot of that, so he
sure do.
He'll take you up on that if you want to get in touch with him,
Absolutely.
and we'll have him give
Oh.
his contact information before we get to the end of the hour for sure.
All right, well, God bless all you guys for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
really,
Phil.
really appreciate the call.
I,
That's great.
I see his point. It kind of piggybacks on what I was saying. You know what I mean? Even if we were to become non-dependent upon Middle Eastern oil, we have very strong, powerful influences in this country that have a stake in it, and they're not going to give it up. And those are the things that don't change. From you know, we waver in our government, you know, trying to keep that suppressed or exalting it, but it still exists. You know, and I think Phil makes a really good point. We really,
And it does.
This is
and,
a big issue.
And so many of the issues we talk about in this show, it's the same common denominator. We have to have a system where democracy actually works for everybody to have an equal voice, not just the ones with the
Well, I'm
biggest
really
wallets.
hoping that this trend with the online fundraising, the small donors, the commitment to rely upon these small donors, and the commitment that the small donors make to their favorite candidate. I mean, that's pretty remarkable too.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping you were not so enthusiastic earlier in the show about it, Bob, but I see that as
Well-
something radically different from what we've seen before, and a whole new opportunity to expand. It's only just getting started.
I just want to see one of those people that's taken that path win.
Me
You know,
too.
it started with Howard Dean. You remember Howard Dean was
Yep.
going to do it? Jerry Brown, who I supported more than once for president, he tried to have a $100 limit on donations. Now it's Elizabeth Warren that's trying it. And I like her, Elizabeth, a lot. But, you know, I want to see one of these people win. That would be the significant thing.
Yeah.
So far, we haven't seen any of them win. Hey, we're being told it's time for a second break.
Yeah,
Boy,
let's
time is-
regroup.
Time is really rolling by here. And
This next segment's going to be a doozy.
you mean the first two haven't?
Yeah, they've been good.
They've been good.
We've been holding the
We're
best
gonna
for
we're
a while.
gonna take a quick break, folks. You see us on the screen 640-3091. We had a wonderful caller. We welcome him. We'd like to welcome you to participate too. We'll be right back. Hey, we're ready for our third and therefore our final segment of the progress report.
It's
for
like
this
a hockey game, you know?
Wednesday. Yeah, hockey. We don't have professional hockey in Manchester. Well,
No, we
let's-
don't. But the
well.
Bruins are taking on the St. Louis Blues in the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
final. That's gonna be
Go
a great-
Bruins.
great
Yeah,
season.
you're going to want to watch that, I'm sure. We are here with Will Hopkins, an Iraq War combat veteran. And he's described that experience rather compellingly if you were with us at the beginning of the show. We won't ask him to repeat it. But he now is the executive director and has been for almost 10 years of New Hampshire Peace Action, the premier group that stands against the designs and of the military-industrial complex to feed the war machine.
It's like trying to hold back the tide. It's
And
a daunting task.
it must be hard to keep your energy up and your enthusiasm up when you see the forces arrayed against you. Will, is it?
It can be. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Mo Baxley, who ran New Hampshire Freedom to Marry. After that happened, they knew that some towns were going to pass town meeting resolutions saying that same-sex marriage was not going to be allowed in that town. This was way back when New Hampshire first passed it, and she came to me, and I just started, and she said, I was hoping you could give me some advice, and I was super flattered because Mo is a senior organizer, is organized with campaigns. She's somebody who I really looked up to then and still do. And she said, how do I prep my members to lose? And I'd never been in a situation to prep my members to win. I mean, the military-industrial complex is extremely powerful. It's the largest industry remaining in this country is the manufacturing of weapons. We sell them all over the world, and we provide them to our own government. So it is sometimes discouraging, but I see a ton of hope. I see hope in young people. They've been raised in a world where they have to know what is fake news, what is propaganda, what is intentionally misleading. They've got to do it quickly, and they've also
The ability
grown up
to exercise critical thinking. It's
Right.
almost a lost art, and I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear you're saying that you're seeing
they've
more
got it
critical
because
thinking.
they have to. When they see something, they have to be able to figure out what that is because there's such crazy stuff on their Facebook feed and their Twitter feed. That they're constantly being subjected to things that are contradictory. So they have to figure out what is reality and why different narratives are being pushed by different groups. They also are much more international. You've got people who grew up playing video games with people in Iran. They can Skype with people in the Congo or in Venezuela. Communication between young people around the world
On an
is much more
individual
fluid.
basis.
On an individual basis, much more fluid, and that makes it really hard to villainize an entire population. When
Which is
when
the
we
first
go to war,
step to war. You have to make
gotta
your
convince them
enemy-
they're different.
Yeah.
They're less human. And the simple reality that in every population you've got jerks and you've got sweet old grandmothers and you've got babies, and babies are always universally innocent and worthy of protection. And when you go to war, everyone dies. And that reality is one that it's so much harder to say the Krauts, the whatever, they're different, they're less, and they're crazy, and they're all going to come kill us. Like people they talk to Muslims. They know Muslims aren't all crazy. They talk to people from Iran they play Fortnite online with someone in Iran, and they're not crazy. They don't that person doesn't deserve to die. And so I see a lot of hope in that kind of the breaking down of hyper-nationalism. This idea that you can, only Americans are worthwhile, and the kids at the border aren't really human. They can die.
And
the
yet
kids
that
in Iran
message
can die.
is being hammered
It
to
is
our public.
but I do think in the younger generation it's a message that's not resonating in the same ways.
That is very hopeful to hear.
It is resonating with a small segment, but by and large, people are rejecting this idea that we have to be in competition with the rest of the world. And I think they're also seeing that if we're going to survive climate change, if we're going to survive nuclear proliferation, we're going to have to do it as a planet together. And we're going to have to get over war. So I think we're actually This is a very chaotic time. There's a lot going on that none of us thought we were going to see in this country. It's a very depressing and sad time, but it's also a time that there's a lot of hope in what we're seeing. And I think that a lot of what we see at the highest levels of politics right now is a reaction to a big change that's coming from a completely different way that everyone's brains are set up, because they've grown up. I mean, the internet became a thing when I was in high school, so I tend to not identify with millennials in the same way as I identify with people a little bit older, because I wasn't raised with. I couldn't. If I wanted to watch a cartoon, I waited until Saturday. I didn't just queue up Netflix and watch a cartoon.
How old school of you?
And that was that's where I'm at. But those who were raised with the internet think a different way, communicate a different way, and it's the current system. Not only is it, I mean, we think we've probably passed peak oil back in about 2004, according to most experts. So we're going to run out of oil. Climate change is happening. Bob's shaking his head, but
I think we're going to run a clean air before we run out.
We might run out of clean air first, but that part of how our system functions has to change. The model of competing and going to war with other countries has to change. We can't keep doing this, and I don't think that the generation coming up will tolerate any of it. And so I think if we can survive the next decade or so, we're going to be okay.
Well, that is so hopeful to hear.
It's very hopeful.
Isn't that nice to hear?
And a great note, to pause on. And you've spent 10 years, obviously, studying your policy, and you've made some great policy arguments. We've had some great policy discussions. In the few minutes we have left, I'd like to talk a little bit about the organization.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's a member organization.
It is. Yeah.
You can sign up and become a member.
Yeah.
And your dues go to promoting the work.
Right.
Do you have workshops? Tell us a little bit about the organization.
Yeah.
How do we get in touch?
How do you get to the vision
Yeah.
that you want us to get to?
Right.
We've hit the policy hard. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the nuts and bolts of how
So
you get to that.
New Hampshire Peace Action is about the same age as me. It's been around since the nuclear freeze movement. I think Bob is one of our founding members. It's so born out of this fear that we were going to have a nuclear war with Russia and trying to get that under control. And it kind of opened with a big win in the first START treaty, in the first round of talks with Gorbachev, the SORT treaty, and the movement away from nuclear conflict, the end of the Cold War, and then has continued to work more on hot wars, the backing of forces in Central and South America, and then when I became involved, our wars in the Middle East. So we do a fair amount of legislative updates and asking our members to call representatives, and we do a whole lot. The primary piece of our work is public education. So we do films, speakers, panels. I go into classes. If Phil has me into his class, I'll go talk. We're 1.5 staff, so our program isn't enormous, but we do occasionally have rallies or marches or buses to national mobilizations. Historically, I've really enjoyed doing youth work, working with high school and college students to help support them in doing peace work. Issue-wise, we're focused right now on nuclear weapons, Yemen, Iran, and Venezuela. So those are kind of our top 4 priorities at the moment.
Are we just about to have your big annual event, your dinner? Or
Absolutely. So I've got my summer meeting on June 1st. That's our membership meeting where we vote on the board and review our budget. We'll have Brenda Lett, who I hope you've had on the show in the past, is going to be our keynote on Saturday the 1st. We've got our fall, I believe it's October 8th. You'd have to check the website for that. And that will be Jamila Rakib, who's the executive director of the Albert Einstein Institute, which teaches essentially... I won't do it justice, but the idea, and it was based on the work of Gene Sharp, who passed away a couple years ago, that nonviolence can be used as combat effectively. So you can you can fight using nonviolence, and this work has been used to overthrow dictators all over the world. The Arab Spring was all using the materials of the Albert Einstein Institute. So Jamila Rakib teaches nonviolent. She's a nonviolent tactician, essentially. So how do you use nonviolent means to achieve objectives? And so that nonviolence, certainly lobbying and public demonstrations count, but so does civil disobedience and kind of the more edgy activism.
Yep.
You that leads to another question I have. Are there other kindred or affiliated organizations that you work with to amplify your message?
Yeah, so
and you just mentioned
yeah.
one, but are there others that you can mention?
Sure. So, there's a national peace action. At the local level, we have projects. The Palestine Education Network is a working group of New Hampshire Peace Action members who work under our umbrella. The Building a Culture of Peace Forum, again, it's New Hampshire Peace Action members who bring, and the Building a Culture of Peace Forum addresses broader sets of issues. So, we'll talk about racism, we'll talk about global warming, and it's 4 or 5 times a year we have forums. Nationally, we work with Win Without War, FCNL. Certainly,
What's FCNL?
Oh, sorry. I do acronyms and unapologetically sometimes. The Friends Committee on National Legislation.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The American Friends Service Committee, of course, is a critical ally. I share office space with Arnie Alpert, who, again, I assume you've had on the show before. And I consider Arnie my primary mentor in my work. So we've got, depending on what you're interested in, I can usually find other folks who are working on it.
I just don't want to leave this out, but I want to make sure you give folks that are listening and watching contact information. Because sounds like Phil might like to get in touch with us, and maybe there's others.
nhpeaceaction.org is our website. You can email me, will@nhpeaceaction.org. Our contact information is all easily available online, but we're on Facebook. We've got a page and a group, so join them both. And the office number is 603-254. Oh, that's my cell. 228-0559. So 228-0559 is the office
It's
amazing
number.
that you can remember a phone number. I can't remember a phone number for the life of me anymore.
Yeah, we used to have to. We have to. Yes, that's what we do now. You mentioned Venezuela, and maybe some people would be surprised like that. Iran, we can understand. We have a national security advisor who's been basically advocating for war with Iran for long before he had his current job.
Yeah.
Back when he was in the George
least
W.
15
Bush
years
administration. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just horrifying because from everything I know about Iran, in many ways, they're not as medieval a country as Saudi Arabia. They don't behead people. They don't keep women
They're
from
a very
driving.
modern country.
I mean, they're a modern country, and as Will well knows, and I can't help but mention it, we overthrew one of their governments in 1953, the first democratic elected government in the whole Middle East, and we overthrew them on behalf of British Petroleum. It wasn't even an American oil company. We went in on behalf of British. I can't believe it. And here we have this uproar about the Russians interfering in an election, and rightly so. But it's not like we don't interfere in people's elections. But anyhow, we're pretty close to the end.
So,
are we really? But tell us a little bit about Venezuela.
So Venezuela, you've got Maduro, not a great guy, just like Saddam. Not somebody we want to be saying, "Yay, Maduro!" But we do want to be saying that backing a coup openly is illegal, and we were very open about that. John Bolton came right on Fox News and said American oil companies need to be able to do business on our terms in Venezuela, and we're going to make sure that happens. The threatening war with Venezuela is absurd. Maduro, while he's not somebody we need to make a hero out of, he did win that election, and the irregularities in that election were not all that different from the irregularities that we have in American elections. So there is a democracy that is not playing on our oil companies' terms. We're openly backing a coup. It's a clear violation of international law, and if our government starts making moves towards putting American troops on the line in Venezuela, I certainly hope we're going to be listening to Jamila Rakib, my annual event speaker, and shutting some things down.
How do you feel about the prospects for a military intervention in either Iran or Venezuela.
Bob, you're bringing up new topics. We got to close the show.
Well, we got to close it, but you got a quick response to that.
So I'm very happy that today, actually, the congressman from this district, Chris Pappas, co-sponsored a bill trying to stop HB 2354, which tries to stop, restrain the administration from going to war in Iran. I think Venezuela, the coup attempt failed, and I think it's very likely that we'll be able to restrain our government from intervening further in the immediate future. Okay. Iran is going to be a push. There's a really significant constellation of financial and political issues pushing us towards conflict with Iran, and getting back into the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is a great first step, and that's going to mean a new president. So restraining until midterms, and then
may it be so. We are out of time. Our director is telling us out of time. We have to do what our director wants because we want to keep him here and working for us. And I just want to thank you, Will, for taking the time to come down and join us. It's been too long.
Anytime.
And we really appreciate it. I hope Phil will follow up, and you can maybe speak to his class and maybe some other folks down here, Manchester folks. We'll be back next week, at least Mike will.
We'll put on a show.
There will be a show next week.
We don't know what it's going to be yet.
It's going to be good because it's always good. We're really good here. The most dangerous hour in TV. Thanks, folks. Have a great evening on this beautiful Wednesday.
See you next week, folks.
See you next week.